Can a person say yes to life without pretending life is easy? That is the final test of man's search for meaning. Welcome back. In this final part, Frankl's thought becomes both darker and more hopeful. He calls the mature stance tragic optimism, the ability to affirm life despite the tragic triad of pain, guilt, and death. The word optimistic can sound shallow, so Frankl protects it with the word tragic. He is not asking us to deny darkness. He is asking whether meaning can still be found inside a life that contains darkness. The first part of the triad is pain. Frankl's whole book has already warned us not to romanticize suffering. Pain is not automatically meaningful. Avoidable suffering should be removed. But unavoidable suffering can become the place where a person bears witness to courage, patience, love, or faithfulness. This is not a performance for others. It is a way of refusing to let pain become the author of the whole person. The second part is guilt. Guilt can destroy a person if it becomes only shame, but it can also become a summons to change. Frankl's view of responsibility means that a person is never merely a product of the past. A wrong action matters, but the next action also matters. Meaning can appear when guilt is transformed into repentance, repair, humility, and a different future. The point is not to erase responsibility. The point is to take it seriously enough to change. The third part is death. Death makes life finite, and finitude can feel terrifying. But Frankl also sees finitude as the condition that makes responsibility urgent. If life were endless, every task could be postponed forever. Because time is limited, each moment asks for a response. Each choice becomes part of what has been lived and cannot be unlived. The past, in this view, is not a trash heap of vanished moments. It is a storehouse of meanings that have been realized. Tragic optimism, therefore, refuses two temptations. The first is despair, which says suffering, guilt, and death cancel meaning. The second is shallow positivity, which says meaning requires ignoring suffering, guilt, and death. Frankl takes the harder road. He says meaning is possible despite them, and sometimes through the response they demand. This is why the book remains powerful. It does not need the world to be gentle in order for responsibility to matter. A central application is the difference between freedom and responsibility. Frankl valued freedom deeply, but he thought freedom without responsibility could become arbitrary. The person is free to choose, but not free from the seriousness of choosing. Every situation asks what is right, what is needed, what is loving, what is courageous, what is truthful. Freedom is not just the absence of constraint. It is the capacity to answer. This is also why self-transcendence returns at the end. A person does not find meaning by making the self the center of every question. Meaning usually points outward, to a person who needs love, a task that needs completion, a truth that needs witness, a burden that needs bearing, or a future that needs protection. The self becomes stronger not by worshiping itself, but by serving something worthy beyond itself. For a modern viewer, the existential vacuum may be the most recognizable problem. Many people have more options than their grandparents, but less certainty about what any of it is for. They can scroll endlessly, optimize endlessly, compare endlessly, and still feel hollow. Frankl's answer is not nostalgia for old rules. It is responsibility. Find the concrete meaning in the concrete situation. Do the next right task. Love the real person. Create the real work. Bear the unavoidable burden with as much dignity as you can. The limitation is that this philosophy requires humility. No one could define another person's meaning from the outside. We can support, question, accompany, and remind, but the answer must be discovered by the person in the situation. Frankl's own life gives authority to the search, not because he solved pain, but because he refused to let pain have the final word. The full book can now be seen as one movement. The memoir shows meaning under extreme deprivation. The psychology explains meaning as a central human need. The Postscript argues that even pain, guilt, and death do not cancel the possibility of meaning. The result is not comfort in the simple sense. It is a demanding hope. You are not promised ease. You are addressed as responsible. Tragic optimism is powerful because it rejects fake innocence. It does not say everything happens for the best. It does not say pain is secretly pleasant. It does not say death is unimportant. It starts with tragedy as tragedy. Only then does it ask whether the human response can still contain meaning. That order matters. Hope that skips grief becomes denial. Hope that passes through grief can become courage. Pain, guilt, and death are not abstract topics for Frankl. They are the boundaries of human life. Pain asks whether a person can suffer without becoming only suffering. Guilt asks whether a person can take responsibility without collapsing into self-hatred. Death asks whether a person can live seriously because time is limited. Each member of the triad threatens meaning, but each can also intensify responsibility. The section on guilt is especially important for modern life. Many people swing between two bad options: deny guilt completely or drown in it. Frankl offers a third path. Guilt is meaningful when it becomes moral change. The past cannot be edited, but the person is not finished. A wrong can become the beginning of repair. A failure can become instruction. Remorse can become a door to responsibility instead of a locked room of shame. Death gives the book a surprisingly practical urgency. Because life ends, the present matters. Because opportunities pass, choices matter. Because people are mortal, love matters now. Frankl's point is not to frighten us into panic. It is to rescue the present from postponement. If there is someone to love, love cannot always wait. If there is work to do, work cannot always wait. If there is a truth to live, life cannot always wait. This also changes the meaning of the past. We often think the past is gone and therefore worthless. Frankl suggests that what has been meaningfully lived is preserved in a different sense. It has become real. A courageous act, a loving relationship, an honest piece of work, or a born suffering is not nothing just because it is over. It has entered the completed record of a life. The freedom-responsibility balance may be one of the book's most relevant warnings. Modern culture often celebrates freedom as the ability to choose anything. Frankl would ask what those choices are for. Freedom without responsibility can become emptiness, impulse, or avoidance. Responsibility without freedom becomes oppression. A meaningful life needs both, the ability to choose and the willingness to answer for the choice. Tragic optimism also protects against cynicism. Cynicism often presents itself as intelligence. It says hope is naive, ideals are foolish, and responsibility is a trick. Frankl's life makes that posture harder to admire. He saw enough darkness to earn despair, yet he did not make despair his philosophy. His optimism is not innocence. It is a decision to keep meaning visible after innocence has been destroyed. For a viewer finishing this series, the central practice is not to repeat a phrase. It is to identify a concrete answer. What pain must be borne with dignity today? What guilt must become repair? What limit or deadline should make your love more urgent? What task is still waiting for the particular person you are? These questions turn tragic optimism from an idea into a way of standing in the world. There is also a social dimension. If people need meaning, then communities should not offer only consumption and distraction. Families, schools, workplaces, and cultures should help people find real responsibility. Not everyone needs the same answer, but everyone needs the chance to matter. Frankl's book is therefore not only private therapy. It is a challenge to any culture that keeps people comfortable while leaving them purposeless. The afterword reinforces the shape of Frankl's life. He did not only survive and then retreat into theory. He taught, practiced, wrote, climbed, flew, and continued meeting people as someone whose own meaning was tied to helping others find theirs. That biographical fact matters because the book's message becomes embodied. Meaning is not a concept Frankl admired from a distance. It became the work of his life. Tragic optimism is not a temperament. Some people are naturally cheerful, and some are not. Frankl is describing a stance deeper than mood. A person can be tired, sad, afraid, or grieving and still practice tragic optimism by refusing to conclude that meaning is gone. This is important because otherwise hope becomes available only to people with a certain personality. Frankl makes hope a responsibility, not a personality trait. The tragic triad also gives a test for shallow advice. Any philosophy of life that cannot speak honestly about pain, guilt, and death will eventually fail people. It may work on easy days, but it will collapse when life becomes serious. Frankl's philosophy survives because it begins where easy advice ends. It does not promise that meaning prevents tragedy. It promises that tragedy does not have absolute authority over meaning. The book's final ethical message is that each person is irreplaceable. If meaning depends on the concrete situation, then no one else can simply live your answer for you. Another person can support you, teach you, and love you, but your responsibility remains yours. That can feel heavy, but it also gives dignity. You are not interchangeable material. Your answer matters because it is tied to your place, relationships, history, and possibilities. This is why Frankl's thought pairs humility with seriousness. Humility says, I do not possess a universal script for every life. Seriousness says, my own life still demands an answer. The combination prevents both arrogance and drift. I cannot command another person's meaning from above, but I also cannot treat my own choices as meaningless. Every day becomes a field of possible response. The final synthesis is simple enough to remember and hard enough to spend a life practicing. Create something. Love someone. Bear the unavoidable with dignity. Repair what guilt reveals. Let mortality make you responsible rather than frantic. Turn outward when the self becomes a prison. And when life asks a question you did not choose, answer in a way that protects the human being you still are. Thank you for listening. If you take one practical question from this summary, make it this: what is life asking of me now? Not in general, not someday. Now, in this relationship, this work, this loss, this opportunity, this fear, this unfinished task. Final close. Frankl's message is not that life always feels meaningful. It is that life can still hold meaning, and we become fully human when we answer it.